My name is Loretta Cella, and I am the Curator of Leaders for Humanity, a change management and leadership specialist, and I am an outlier.
Welcome to Outlier on Air with Ever Gonzalez, the show where we interview the founders, disruptors, and mavens of the world. Learn how grit, failure, and success are all a part of the entrepreneurial journey.
Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, the podcast where we interview founders, disruptors, and mavens. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. On today's episode, we have Loretta Cella. She is a global leadership facilitator, coach, and change management consultant and public speaker. Loretta, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to join everybody and share a little bit about what's been going on.
You have a lot going on, and I can't wait to share it with our audience for sure. Before we officially get started, we'd like to kind of paint the picture of where you are and what you're doing right now. So why don't you tell us where you're calling us from right now?
So I am calling right now from the Sunshine Coast in beautiful British Columbia, Canada, out of my home. And I have two puppies. So I mentioned to Ever, I have two puppies running around the home. So if you hear squeaks and maybe some barks, that's coming from them. It's because they're having a good time. But that's where I'm calling from, and that's what's going on right now.
We're going to get into the work that you do right now, but with the charities and the different missions that you have. But what's it like running these organizations and doing the work that you do out of your specific area?
Yeah, so I just moved from Vancouver. So I just moved from big city to small town. And I have been transitioning and transforming my life quite a bit in the last 60 days. So it's a bit of a shift and change because a lot of it now is run out of my home. And then I commute to the city a couple times a week for contracts. And it's an interesting change. But one thing I love about small towns is the sense of community. And so there's a lot of entrepreneurs here, a lot of really innovative, fun entrepreneurs and creative ones. And so I'm excited to become part of that community and grow and expand with them.
I love how, especially now, right? Small city, big city, it doesn't matter. People are doing amazing things all over the world with a laptop, a phone, and internet connection, right? And it doesn't really matter where you're from. But I love the fact that you're in a small town doing these global basic missions, really helping tons of people. And I want to get right into it.
Yeah.
When you introduce yourself at a party or at a conference, how do you do it? What do you say? Because you're doing so much.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody's like, hey, hold on a second. When I look at your book, when I look at this, when I look at your LinkedIn, like, I have no idea what you do. So I always tell people that I provide people the opportunity to reach their potential. And that is developing their leadership and helping them through change. So as we know, anytime that we want to reach our potential, we're changing, we're growing as people, and we're growing professionally. And so my job is to be able to support people to work through the challenges that they face, and get clear plans and visions in order to create that space for themselves.
That's great. That's I'm assuming difficult work, something that you've kind of dedicated your life to for the last several years. Mm-hmm. Before we kind of get into the details of Passion to Lead and Leaders for Humanity, what are some of the challenges that you see as you're helping a lot of these young people, a lot of these just people in general around the world, as we try to kind of get to that level that we need to get to in order to be the leaders and the entrepreneurs and just the basically humans that we should be, have potential to be?
Mm-hmm. You know what? The big thing is, and it's funny. My girlfriend, her and I, she lives in San Diego, and she actually was just here for a couple days. One of the things that we find constantly, we have conversations about, is the willingness to dig deep. And so, oftentimes, people think that leadership means I have a title, I make a certain amount of money, I sit at a certain level, and then I receive a certain level of success and happiness because of that. That's not true. The reality is I've met leaders as young as 10, and I've met leaders, real, authentic, amazing leaders that are 15, 16, 17, 90 years of age, and they don't have a specific title, and they don't sit on a specific board, and what they do, though, is they lead their lives really connected to their values and are on a mission to do something wonderful in the world. And so oftentimes in order to get there, we have to dig a little deeper in order to understand ourselves and our core values and unblock some of the belief systems that we have in order to achieve that, that I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not capable, I don't have this, I don't have that, all that kind of stuff that shows up. To remove those belief systems or transform them to create a greater sense of empowerment and confidence and happiness.
In our lives and in business, right, we see a lot of what we consider natural leaders, right? Are these guys born this way? Do they learn it? Is it a combination? Can anybody become a leader in our own lives?
So, I would want to put that back on you ever and say, what is your definition of a leader?
That's a good question. Somebody that is in charge, in my opinion, somebody that's in charge of their own lives, doing the things that they want to do, right? Not necessarily leading a company or an initiative or anything like that. Just somebody that has the confidence to do what they want.
Yeah. So does everybody have the ability to do that? I think so.
Yeah, I believe so. Well, now let's get a little bit business on the business side of it.
Yeah.
These bosses, these leaders, these managers that we have, the CEOs that we work with, some of them are great, some of them are horrible, right? What? Yes,
I get hired to work with those ones. So I get often contracted by large companies or organizations to do leadership development and work with those who perhaps have gone up the ranks because of time or because of education, but not necessarily have all of the emotional intelligence or the understanding needed in order to thrive as a leader and support people. Because really, in a leadership position, we have two roles. The first one is to handle ourselves, right? To be able to lead well. And I apologize, Charlie's running around like a crazy dog with some newspaper.
No, I love it.
And then the other thing we do is responsibility to other people. Right? So we first have to take care of ourselves, and then we have to take care of other people. If we're not in a position to do that, or haven't been trained or shown how to, and we understand the old school way of leadership means that I have a position and I sit in a certain level, then you're not going to be a great leader. It's not going to happen. You might naturally, because of, we can go back to the psychology of nurture and nature and all of those things. You might naturally just be a really great leader, but it's because you've learned those things along the way and you're more inclined to. But that doesn't mean that somebody can't get there. Mm-hmm. Right? So I can give a specific example if that's helpful.
Absolutely, we'd love it.
Okay, so I just got hired last year for 9 months to work with a large IT company with a VP who was tagged with being a bully. And that's pretty serious business, right? Like that is a criminal offense or could be a criminal offense depending on the severity of the accusations. And so the HR called and said, we do need somebody to help and support this. And can you work with this person? So I met with this person. And it was very apparent to me that in a very short period of time, it wasn't that she was a mean person or incapable person, but she was unsure. Mm. And she needed some support to develop and understand what leadership meant and what it looked like and who she was within that role in order to succeed at a greater capacity. And within a very short time, she went from being a leader that was just like, just do this and get this done. And here's a short email. And here, to one goes, how can I help you? How can I serve you? How can I support you to grow and develop in your role so that we can, in order to get this work done? And still meeting timelines, budgets, and all those types of things, but putting in the people component into the work that she was doing.
So let's talk about specifics then. If Outlier were to work with you or somebody listening that wants to contact you to come help with our own leaders, or maybe a specific case, let's get into the nitty gritty. What does that look like? I'm assuming it's not a cookie cutter approach to everybody, but give us maybe an overview of how specifically you would help somebody in our organization or somebody that's listening.
Mm-hmm. So I think it depends on what the needs are, right? So this is the one thing, the bonus of having background internationally, and I've worked within 10 countries. I've worked with 5-year-olds, and I've worked with VPs of companies and everything in between. So is that I need to hear what's going on. So the very first conversation I have is a conversation and an assessment. to say, what is it the actual needs are? Where are you at right now? What are the challenges that you face? And what are you willing to do to overcome those? The willingness is a big deal. So what happens often is people say, yeah, I want this and this to happen, but I'm not willing to go here and here and here. Can't help you. Sorry. And I'm very clear with people. And when I work with my private coaching clients, same thing. And I said, I'll scale them on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all and 10 being absolutely. How committed are you to this process? And they'll say 8. I'm really sorry, I can't work with you.
Oh, even at an 8, you won't?
Nope. I said, let me know when you're at least a 9.
Whoa, really?
Because, it's really funny. I take pride in my results. And so if somebody's not willing to commit at a 9, and I can't walk them from an 8 to a 9 in a 15-minute conversation, it's not going to work. So because the commitment is the willingness, the vulnerability, and they don't need to know how. They don't need to know the details, and they don't need to commit to a certain level of engagement, but they need to commit to the engagement.
I'm trying to picture what this would look like, right? If my board of directors contacted you and said, hey, work with this guy Ever, right? He needs some help.
Yeah.
I think automatically, and I think maybe it's human nature, and I'm sure you see this, I would be on the defensive right away as soon as you came in, right? So your job must be difficult from the moment you meet with these people. How do you overcome that?
So I always, I think there's two parts that happen. The first is I go, let me know why you think you're here.
Okay. Right.
So why do you think you're here? The first one is often like, well, because they told me.
Nice.
Or because, well, this and this and this happened. It's like, okay, so what part do you think you might have had in that? Or where do you feel that you might need some extra support? Where do you feel some pain points where you're not feeling the level of happiness and success? So oftentimes when people come to me or mandated, I hate using that word, but they're mandated to work with me, they often already know that there's something not sitting right within themselves, right? They're already feeling they're not level of success that they would like to feel. So I start from that and I go, well, what level of success do you want to feel? Experience. How might you think we need to get there? What do you think is missing? And so I really put that back on the person. It's not about me coming in to mandate from somebody else, but how can I help you to raise your potential so that you can feel the level of success and happiness that you want to experience in your life, in your work.
That's huge, right?
It's huge. And so what happens, that defensiveness?
I can see that. So with I know you mentioned that it's it's different with all the different opportunities that you have when you're working with somebody. Once you have that initial conversation and you both decide that you're going to be working together, again, what does that look like? Am I on the phone with you once a week? Are you coming into my office? Like, am I reading books that you're recommending? What is that? What am I going to do?
Okay, so usually what happens is I have a very specific way of coaching. So some entrepreneur coaches would probably tell me that I'm not being very smart financially when I do this, but I have a 90-day mark, which means that I will not sign you on for more than 90 days right off the bat. I don't need to.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I coach and the way that I work. So I take 2 coaching modalities and I mix them together, and that's the platform that I operate off of for coaching. And so the very first session is that initial conversation, kind of like the one you and I just had. It's a check-in. What is it that you need? How can I support you? Here's what I have to offer. Here's how I do it. Here's where I stand. And I'm not coming from a place of judgment or criticism because I've probably gone there and been there myself. And so I know what it's like to stand in that person's shoes at some point in time. And if I haven't gone through it, one of my clients has gone through it. And then the second conversation usually starts with, I have a workshop called the 5 Essential Parts of Self. And these 5 essential parts of self are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. And so what happens is I actually do an assessment with them based on those 5 things and start on a goal-setting platform in those 5 areas. And then we move into a coaching where each week people say, you know what, this week I really want to focus on this. And this week I really want to focus on this. And then each week for 3 sessions a month, we work for 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. And we work through a specific goal to get a result and an action each week. And then on the third week, when we have that week break, there's a homework. There's usually a book, an exercise, or some type of platform or plan that they have to actually operate out of that week, and then bring that back on the week coming in the following month.
How many people can you work with at a time?
Because I do large corporate contracts, I only take 6 to 7 clients a month maximum. So, and I choose it that way because I want the individual attention and support that I can offer. And the work that I do is, it can be pretty draining. It can be, so I need to make sure that I have a really good balance of my self-care, my time with my dogs, my hiking. So the forest is my actual backyard now, and my front yard is a beach. So,
You're set.
I literally spend every day on the beach and in the forest. So for me, it's really important to have that balance so that I can make sure that I provide the best possible service to those that I work with.
We've had other coaches, other leadership coaches, other type of people on our podcast to talk about what they do, obviously. But you're still very unique in your experience. You've been all over the world, right? You've worked with. I'm not even going to guess at how many people, but some of the bios that I saw. 5,000 young women globally, helping them gain leadership skills, things like that. And I want to get into that here in just a sec, but the leadership styles, they must change, right? From culture to country and different things like that. But is there an underlining theme that goes along from location to location? Is a great leader here in the U.S. going to be the same as a great leader in Vietnam or some of these other places that you've been?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. The underlying piece that all of them have is they list, so there's 2 actions that they do, and there's a place that they stand from. When I stand from it's a value. So the 2 characteristics that they display is they offer a space to be heard, to allow others to be heard, and a sense of belonging. So in all the world, and I'll just tell you a little background, in a lot of the work that I do, I spend a lot of time in observation. So I spend a lot of time going, what is it that's happening here? Why is it happening here? How are people working, not working? Why is it? So I'm always in that analytical space, so in that informal research, so to speak. And the 2 things that stop people from succeeding are being heard and belonging. So when you provide somebody a space to be heard and belong, all of a sudden shit changes. Like shit really changes, because all of a sudden I matter. I'm important because somebody's hearing me, and I'm more motivated. When I feel like I belong, I'm more motivated to take action. And so all the leaders across the world, when I connect with them, and I've had some really interesting stories and met some really interesting leaders, is they really hear, and they care about what they're hearing, and they care about the people that they're working with. And the first thing is they bring them in, come into my home, come into my space, come into my office, sit down. They're that authentic connection that they provide is, and that goes into last point, which is the value piece, is that all of them have the value of inclusion. Like they all want people to feel like they're included in something and part of something, which means that they delegate more, which means that they assign tasks in a way that are assigned to people who, that's where they thrive, that they acknowledge people where they're at, and they almost all sit in a value of creating freedom, which is interesting enough.
So this might be an unfair question. What are some of the leaders that you see, whether it's political or in business or just worldwide, that you admire? That you like that's that guy, that gal has got to go.
I'm like political. I don't know if
okay.
it's funny. I was going to jokingly say Trump. That hair.
That's right.
I tell you.
That hair, just the hair alone.
Huge. Sorry, I just had to. So politically, I wouldn't say that I am knowledgeable enough outside of the smaller, more intimate countries, which I'm sure there's some phenomenal leaders in some of the smaller countries. But when you look at people, like Justin Trudeau, but more, I think about Justin Trudeau's wife, Sophia. Like I think about her, and I think about
Prime Minister in Canada.
Yeah, Prime Minister in Canada. Sorry, yes, the Prime Minister in Canada. There is a real, although he has a political agenda, and there's some things that people are quite questioning right now. There's a real authenticity to where he stands and how he stands. And there's a real commitment to people and to equality and to opportunities and to listening to what it is that people need and want the most. It goes back to the same. He's listening. He's present. In the Gay Pride Parade, he was there, and almost all of them in Canada, he's there in the middle of the marches. His wife is alongside with him. His children are with him. He's got a huge sense of community and belief in that there's opportunity to correct wrongs that have been wronged for a very long time.
Whatever his political stances are, I don't know that it matters as much. For whatever reason, all of our American friends are in love with him. They he's charismatic. Not that this matters. Maybe it does matter. He's attractive, right? He seems to be for the people, right? And saying all the right things, so I can see that.
Yeah. I think there's a combination, and so when I think of like great leaders that I've worked with, and it's really funny in politics. There's very few that and it's probably, even though I work in government in contracts, there's very few that I can say that I feel drawn or compelled to fight for or stand with. Mm-hmm. Stand with is probably a better term because it's not violent. So I'm very conscious of my words. So that was my goal for this year, is be very conscious of the words that I choose to use. And so the stand with. So I think about Trudeau, and I think about those. What I've seen so far of him. The challenge is that with politics and like with most people, unless we spend time with them, we don't really know who they are.
Yeah. For whatever reason, he's coming across as very genuine and somebody that you can get behind and stand with. So good example. Now I want to get into some of the more specific work that you're doing as well. Let's talk about you. So you founded Passion to Lead, a charity. Let's talk about that and what it's turned into.
Yeah. So I started Passion to Lead used to be called Passion Foundation. I started it in 2007. So we've been operating, it'll be 10 years this year, which is really incredible. And I started Passion to Lead because of my own story. And so I grew up with immigrant parents who have a very specific way of being in the world, or for me to be as a woman in the world. And then I grew up in a culture that saw me much different. So North American, Canadian culture that said that I could be and do anything I wanted to be and do. And my background is Italian, and my job was inside the house, cook, clean, and all of those things.
Even now?
Back when when I was a kid, that was a real, not now, but back then, that was a real, my brother would be outside mowing the lawn and things like that, and I would be cleaning and doing, all of that. But inside, I wasn't like that. I was I was really sporty. I loved sports. I loved Barbies. I loved painting. I loved everything. And so I wasn't in a box. And I didn't have anybody to facilitate who I was, or how do I get to where I was, or how do I facilitate the difference of the two worlds. And when we get talking down to, and it took me a long time to get here, it's the difference between the culture of we and the culture of I. Mm-hmm. Right? North American culture is very much I, me. How can I have this? How can I grow? How can I expand? And then there's the other culture, which is we, which is often in most other places in the world, where it's how do we do this? How do we grow? How do we survive? How do we support each other? How do we create freedom? And so nobody facilitated really the two of those for me. And because I'm a very sensitive person, I took a really dark path as a teenager. I got into a lot of trouble, and I ended up on the floor in a number of different ways. And you can watch one of my TEDx talks or whatever to get into the details of that. But as a result, I created a nonprofit organization after working in a sub-ghetto in Toronto, Ontario. that supported young women to discover who they were from the inside out and developing their leadership. So I took the learnings of my story, I took my education, and I created this nonprofit. No idea what I was doing, by the way. No idea.
Like a true entrepreneur. Good for you.
I just jumped. Somebody said, Loretta, you can do this, and I'll help you. And I said, okay, let's do it. And then I ended up, 10 years later, 10 countries, a documentary that's almost done. And over 5,000 young girls receiving leadership through a course that I created, which is called The Elements of Success. And it's a 14-hour program that girls walk through to discover who they are, understanding their limitations, courage to remove them, creating greater community and cooperation, skills, and service. So I teach them basic project management, and they create a community project at the end of their learning to solidify their leadership. And last year we changed the name to Passion to Lead and started boys programming to change the discussion between girls and boys so that we could have a different way for our future.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so you transitioned from just girls to now including young men as well. So as fathers, as brothers, as sons, what can we do to encourage, right, our daughters, our sisters, our mothers to, I don't know, it's even silly to kind of bring it up a little bit, but to stand up and to do whatever they want to do for the most part, right?
I always, that's a tough question because it depends on where people are standing or what's going on. One thing that I always say is ask questions. What is it that you want? Where do you want to go? How can I support you? And I think sometimes those three questions alone can make a huge difference because it requires self-reflection, and self-reflection starts to build in and connect with self. And when you start to develop your sense of self, your power and your voice becomes bigger because you find what it is that you're passionate about or connected to or intrigued or curious about. And then you start to explore and grow. And I think that is just what we need in our world. I think, based on, maybe I'll back up a little bit here. For many years, and this is a little bit controversy, but for many years, being a feminist meant I have to fight for what it is that I want. I have to fight in order to succeed. When I hear that, fight is, and again, this goes back to my goal of being conscious of my words. When we have to fight for something, we're coming at it with anger. We're coming at it with, which is good sometimes to create change. We need anger to create change often, right? But it's not necessarily the way that we're going to heal and transform. When I say I'm going to connect to what it is that's meaningful to me, and I'm going to step forward with courage, and I'm going to step forward with vulnerability, and I'm going to step forward with open-mindedness, and I'm going to step forward with the understanding that there's possibility.
I love that, right? I think with what you're describing kind of comes back down to a lot of the men that consider themselves pro women, all that good stuff, were maybe not turned off, but certainly had to stand there and kind of figure out what, all this anger was coming from. Some of it justified, but you're saying stand together as opposed to fight.
Yeah, I think
that's huge.
It is. To me, it is. It's because we got to where we are because of violence, right?
Yeah.
Violence has been in and around my life for a very long time. And so both in the work that I do, in my personal life in different ways, and every time I observe this violence, whether it's by words or actions or thoughts, or all it does is perpetuate cycles. So, people get, when I say the women in India, so we've done lots of work in India, and, people are like, yeah, those women are standing up and they're beating the men who tried to beat them, right? And you see these videos all over the internet, and it breaks my heart. Because if a woman feels that in order for her to find power, she has to be violent, it's not the answer.
Sure. And here you are making a change, which is, how are you received in a lot of these different countries with your mission, with your approach?
there's a lot of discussion that has to be had, especially in places like, when we've worked in India before. We wanted to invite the mothers in this one community that we have a partner with in Bangalore. We wanted to invite the mothers in to explain to them what we were going to be teaching the girls, because we wanted them to be able to support it. And they actually didn't at first. They're like, you can't talk to our daughters about this and do this and this and this.
Really?
Because why, once we dug deep, is because they themselves didn't know how to deal with it. So we explained the process that we walked through, and they're like, well, we want to learn these things, and then there's excitement, and there's, so it's really interesting. We have to do a lot of explaining often. And in countries where, men, are really anti-empowerment of women, it's often because of fear. It has nothing to do with anything but fear. And that's a loss of power and control. Right? And when we have loss of power and control, we don't have tools and skills, we don't know what to do. And so that's why violence actually with men, and it's a little side note, has actually in some cases increased, not decreased, with women being empowered. Because the men don't know what to do when they've lost that power and control. When a woman says, no, I'm not going to take that, or no, I'm not going to do that, or here, I'm going to actually go out and get a job, or here, I'm going to go to school, or whatever it might be. But it's like, I don't know what to do with that, because I don't have the communication skills. I don't have the vulnerability, the connection to the vulnerability, and it hasn't been masculine and okay. And that's why we developed the boys program, was because we wanted to start to change the discussion and how we were discussing those challenges moving forward.
When did you start with the boys?
We started the very first boys program in the Northwest Territories, which is in northern Canada. I started that. I did the first one in November. When did I get Charlie? I rescued a dog when I was up there. So it would have been November. So November, I did the very first boys program up there.
How was it received? You know what?
It was really, because it was a small town of 600 people. Lots of poverty, a lot of First Nations communities, or First Nation community, and a lot of challenges with those kids. So a lot of fetal alcohol syndrome, fetal alcohol effects, not eating properly, all the challenges that we face in communities like that. And what I did is, it was one of the hardest programs I've ever done in my entire life, believe it or not. But we did the first module together with the boys and the girls, which is really neat. And then I did the boys and the girls separately, and they're learning, so they had some safe space. And then we brought them together to do their community projects. And it's gone really, really well. They created some amazing community projects that they're working on now, and we're working with the teachers there and the community workers to get those rolling. And then I did another one in another part of British Columbia, in a smaller town and First Nations community, and we actually did the boys and the girls together. So we taught the course together. And that was really fascinating too. To get them on the same page was not an easy task, but it did happen, which was really great.
Nice. I'm glad. So with all that you're doing, and when we have you back on the show in 3 years, what is all this going to look like, and what are we going to be talking about?
Wow, in 3 years. Right now I'm thinking about what's happening tomorrow. You know what? In 3 years, so we have just launched the Train the Trainer program for the girls program. And so, in 3 years from now, I would like to see trainers in all the places in the world, if not more, that we've had doing this leadership development, not just with girls, but with boys as well, and changing those conversations. Definitely will have my book done. I have been outlining a series for Leaders for Humanity. And it's one for entrepreneurs, one's for students who are trying to figure out where they're going, and then the other one is for women in the position of creating more authenticity with their leadership. So they're little kind of mini books of the same book, and so those ones will be done.
Big plans.
And hopefully I might have another dog.
Nice to add to the bunch, to the two, right? Yeah. Good. So now, as we kind of start to wrap this up a little bit, right? For you right now as an entrepreneur, what's the hardest part of your day? What are you struggling with? What's keeping you up at night?
So, interesting enough, which is, I think, indicative of a lot of women in my age range right now, is managing everything alone. So I have my own house that I bought.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 2 dogs. I've got a charity. I've got a business. And so managing all the components of that by myself and trying to create a schedule and getting really clear on that process of the beginning of my day and the end of the day and fitting everything in is sometimes quite challenging. So that is probably right now is managing and forecasting, as you mentioned, like I'm thinking about today and tomorrow. And then I have Saturday off and I'm not doing any work on Saturday.
Nice.
So I think that's it. Is just is that managing that time. I mean, I manage time really well, but it's the organization of all the components and pieces in order to stay not afloat, but to succeed. So I choose not to survive. I like to thrive. And so that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny that you mentioned that. I would not have guessed that was one of the things that, because of your everything that you're doing, no doubt that you're organized and you're managing your time wisely. So it's interesting that's what came up. Obviously, you at the level that you're operating in needs to be crystal clear, very precise, very very in tune. So we wish you much success. This I don't know. This episode is one of those that is going to be popular, is going to be worthwhile. Our audience is going to engage with, just because you are doing specific things, but it's a global type of a challenge, and it's one of those stories that we can all learn from, right? With leadership and kind of going back and helping those that you feel are in the most need, and it's very inspiring. Thank you for your words of wisdom and for your story.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to listen to this. Actually, sometimes I do a lot of speaking and podcasts and things like that. And often I don't go back and listen. So I'm actually interested in going back and listening to this and reflecting on it myself.
Perfect. I can already tell that it's going to be one of the good ones. So last couple questions, rapid fire. What is this going to look like, or not? At the end of all of this, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, so that's changed. So how I want to be remembered is somebody who was of service.
Good. Simple.
Simple.
Powerful though.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, you're a female. You're a leader. You've changed a lot of lives. You're going to continue to change a lot of lives. Is there any advice that you have, not just for our female listeners, but for our entrepreneurial audience in general? What can we learn from you? What can we take home with us right now that'll kind of help us get to that next level?
So interesting. The first thing that came to mind is do not follow your passion, follow your curiosity.
Ooh, interesting. Explain.
So when we find passion is often heated, right? And you think things that you're passionate about, and it's often heated, and that heat burns out. We follow things that we're curious will always sustain our journey.
That could be on a T-shirt type of advice. That's good stuff.
I get cuts on that, right?
That's right.
Yeah, no, follow your curiosity. And everybody always says, how did you get to where you are? And I said, if I look back, 5 years or 10 years, there is no way that you would have told me that I would have been all over the world making a documentary, working with young women, working with leaders, working in government, owning my own home that looks out at the ocean. It would just never have happened, right? And it's just the only reason why that's happened is because I've got a sense of curiosity and I just kept following it. And it has resulted in something pretty awesome.
I really like that advice. We get a lot of standard answers and stuff, but this one's going to make me think for sure.
Awesome.
Right? Because we hear, follow your passion all the time, and we don't even think about it anymore. We just kind of think that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So now, those that are interested in following you, in connecting with you, where can we find you online?
If I keep up with it, my social media is terrible. So LinkedIn is something that I check often, and I have articles on there. things that I've written. So that often have coaching advice in different pieces. So that's probably the best, is look me up on LinkedIn. The other place is Twitter. That's the only other place that I can say that you can find me occasionally, because it's connected to my LinkedIn. And every time I hit my LinkedIn, my Twitter goes off. So yeah.
I love it. So Outliers, you can go to outliermagazine.co. That's outliermagazine.co. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it. But there you're also going to find links to Loretta's website, social media accounts, the coaching programs, all that good stuff. Feel free to connect with her. Obviously, she knows what she's doing. You heard here today that she has the goods, and she's very inspiring. So reach out to her. Loretta, again, this has been fun. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and sharing your story with our audience.
Thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from anybody. If you have any feedback or thoughts on what I said, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just shoot me an email off the website.
Absolutely, no doubt that they will. So Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
No